Hey, gang, I want to tell you about True Hemp Science full spectrum CBD products. They are fantastic. I've been using them now for a couple of months. I've used their balms. I've used their oils to sleep. And today I'll be talking about a whole new product. Now listen, True Hemp Science promises you premium quality, pure ingredients, and true value. They source the highest grade organic hemp from around the world to handcraft the finest full spectrum CBD products. They offer a complete line of CBD products, including full spectrum CBD oils, tinctures, CBD skincare lotions, CBD sports rubs, CBD gummies, and CBD gluten-free chocolates. They number their CBD products to differentiate them by strain, by farm, and by extraction method. Now, last week I was telling you about the number 81, which is great for relaxation and sleep. But today I'm going to be talking to you about number G41. That's full spectrum CBG plus CBDA plus terpenes. Now, this has given me some focus. It has some CBD in it, but it doesn't make you sleepy or tired or foggy in any way. The CBG kind of gives you some focus, and it energizes your brain while keeping you calm and cool. You know what I'm saying? People report it relaxes their brain and does not affect cognitive performance. While it is calming, it is less physically so than CBD. It's great for working. It's great for getting your work done. I'm even using it right now. So, gang, How Did I Get Here is partnered with True Hemp Science full spectrum CBD products. And if you use the code HDIGH, you will get something special. Purchase $65 worth of regular price products and receive 296 milligrams of number 81 distillate. That's the one I was telling you about. That's great for rest, relaxation, and sleep. Just go to truehempscience.com/HDIGH for How Did I Get Here? And you can also visit them at their brick and mortar store. That's right. They have a physical location right here in Austin at 505 West Mary Street, Unit C, Austin, Texas. Don't forget, use the code HDIGH. If you're already using CBD products, switch over to this one. I promise it's going to be great. You're going to love it. All of these products are great, and the CBG, CBDA is unbelievable. Like I'm telling you, I feel very clear. I feel very focused. I haven't been drinking a bunch of coffee all day, and I'm not all anxious from coffee. You know what I'm saying? TrueHempScience.com, HDIGH. You're not only getting yourself some CBD, but you're helping us out here, right? By using the code HDIGH. TrueHempScience.com. Go get your full spectrum CBD products today. Let's get down.
And you may ask yourself, well, how did I get here?
It's time for How Did I Get Here? And now here is your host, Johnny
When we talked all night.
All right. Hello, I'm Johnny. I'm your host. Welcome to the show. I hope you guys are having a good week. I hope that you're having an all right week. The Austin music scene has suffered a really huge loss this week, and I put out a show yesterday with both episodes that they were on, but Daniel Sahad from Nane passed away on Sunday, and that was a real sad thing. You can see it, you're seeing it on social media a lot, like everybody had some kind of connection to this dude, and he really impacted so many people's lives, and he's really going to be missed. Sad times here in the Austin music scene. We got to celebrate Daniel's life. Go check out Nane if you've never heard them. Those interviews with him, if you were a fan of theirs and you didn't get to hear them, I put them both together on an episode, and they're the ones right before this one. So, it's been an intense week. It's been crazy. I actually had a pretty good weekend before that. I played out at the Rock and Restock event at Circle C with this band called Briscoe on Friday. It was great. I was telling you guys that I was a little bit worried about my allergies, and it was tough. It was a tough show to sing outside with a bunch of oak blowing around when you're totally allergic to oak. And then Saturday I went to Houston and did a show with Skyrocket for the Juvenile Diabetes Research Foundation, and that was a lot of fun. It was a great show. They ended up raising $3.6 million that night. That was really, really, really exciting and fun crowd to play to at the end of that event. Anyway, came home and rested, and then got the news about Daniel on Monday and was just really in shock. Daniel and I were friends. not only was he on the show and I'd seen the band play, but also I work with the Austin Music Foundation, and we put out those artist development program records every year. And in 2020, he was one of the engineers on the record, so I got to spend a shitload of times hanging out, with him, and it was great. And I'm really glad I got to know him, and I'm very sorry that he's gone, along with everyone else. Sad times. It's a hard thing not to talk about, Whew. Anyway, gang, I have a great show for you today. Okay. Composer Graham Reynolds is on the show today. You might know him from Golden Arm Trio, from the many scores he's done for films like Before Midnight, A Scanner Darkly, Bernie, Where'd You Go, Bernadette, and many, many more. Well, his latest endeavor is MXTX, a cross-border exchange. Now, this is a project done in 3 parts. One of them is a record, which is available now, wherever it is you stream and download music, MXTX, a cross-border exchange. The other one is a sample library made with the 40 artists, north and south of the border, that were there to make this album. Now, this is crazy, man. Like, Graham got together with a couple of other people, Orion Garcia, Coca Trevino, and Felipe Perez Santiago of Mexico City. A couple guys from Mexico, a couple guys from America. They got 40 artists from north and south of the border. They made a sample library that will be available to people for free. You can get out there and use these samples that they used to make this record. And the record's not only like electronic and sampley, but it's also like using chamber instruments, like actual acoustic instruments, stringed instruments, and combining all of them to make this new kind of music, which is what Graham Reynolds' thing is all about. Anyway, so the third component of the MXTX cross-border exchange project is live performances. And the very first one takes place on April 16th at Fusebox Festival at Moody Garden at Waterloo Park. That's April 16th. Now, you can find out all about this stuff, the sample library, the album. You can get tickets to the show, all by going to goldenhornet.org/MXTX. That's goldenhornet.org/MXTX. I'll put a link to that in the text of this podcast. But Graham and I have an incredible conversation. In fact, it was the second one we had, because we started to have one over Zoom, and the Zoom thing after like 20 minutes kind of started getting crappy. And I was having such a good time talking to him. I was like, man, is there any way we can do this in person? And so he invited me out to his studio, this magical, beautiful place with all of these gorgeous instruments hanging on the wall, all these bookshelves filled with books, this beautiful ceiling area. We went into a little room on the side where obviously they hang out, and they've got a TV in there, and they've got a lot of booze in there. But we just sat there and talked, and we talked about his career. We talked about this MXTX, a cross-border exchange, this amazing project that has taken, so long to do, and being done, with so many people in 2 different countries, and really what they were trying to do sociologically with this, Anyway, great conversations with Graham Reynolds. I want to thank him for inviting me out to his studio. I had a wonderful time. He's a wonderful host and a great hang. So without further ado, please enjoy my conversation with the amazing Graham Reynolds. Let's get down. So you have a beautiful studio.
Thank you.
So inspiring.
It's designed to make you want to make music.
Yeah. How much time are you in here every day?
Yes.
Yeah.
Every day.
Yeah.
I mean, unless I'm out of town.
When you're out of, do you do performances out of, I know you do performances around town.
Yeah, I mean, it's not getting the bus or getting the band and tour, but like we were in Indiana last week doing the opera we made about Pancho Villa. So, and that was just, we flew up, spent a couple days adapting to the theater, and then did the one performance and then flew back.
That's amazing.
So that's more typical.
Are those? That's one thing. Like a production like that is so big, and the luxury of being a musician like on tour is you get better. Like you look back, like maybe the first few gigs weren't as good as the last couple, right?
Yeah.
But when you have just one, that always drives me fucking crazy. Like having to work so hard for one thing.
Yeah, it's tricky. I mean, I like doing so many things, but this one we did a pre-pandemic tour it a bunch, so it has gotten better each time. And in a way, this way we had the tightness of having done it a bunch of times, but the freshness of not having done it in 2 years. So it was a little, and we had a couple of days of rehearsals, so
that's
helps.
good.
Yeah.
So let's talk about this MXTX album. I listened to it again today. It's amazing, but there's a whole bunch of different aspects to this. Yeah. And one of them is that I thought of today, and I don't think we talked about this last time because you and I started to do this over Zoom, and we had a technical difficulty and decided to do it in person.
Yeah, yeah.
So, and I'm really glad we did because I've always wanted to meet you in person and stuff. What was the goal culturally? Like not a political thing, because I feel like everything's politicized in some way at this point. But like culturally, what was the goal of this project?
It's a cultural exchange, a cultural bridge. We have, here we are in Texas, and Mexico is closer than New York, closer than LA. Mm-hmm. Mexico City is closer than any of those places even, and that's pretty deep down into Mexico. Yeah. And Texas used to be part of Mexico. There's a lot of shared culture, geography, music, but at the same time we have this arbitrary dividing line of the border, and so sort of exploring together what it means to make music across that artificial line.
And was the goal like kind of to circumvent the intensity that surrounds the idea of the border now? Is that just
exactly.
kind of like, hey, we can do stuff without having a whole
the border has become a vehicle for hate and symbolic things and then literal physical things, and just demonstrate how we're all living in the same place, right, just across a river from each other, and it's more natural to collaborate and work together than it is to divide us.
Right. Okay, so then this also, the three of you guys, Felipe Perez Santiago and Orion Garcia, you guys were the three sort of curators.
And then there's Coca Trevino is one Coca more curator. Okay. Yeah, so she's from Monterrey and lives in Mexico. So she, just like the project is Mexico and Texas, she has a presence and a history with both places.
Oh, cool. Yeah. Cool. So in that, you guys sent tracks back and forth, and like, how did this work, making this album?
It's a complicated process to explain. So the whole project MXTX has three components, to put it as simply as I can. A sample library, which will be free for anybody to use, an album, and which just came out, and a concert. Mm-hmm. And so three relatively simple things to understand, but how they all came about is more complex. So the four of us, the curators, we swapped ideas about artists to invite to be involved in the sample library. And we narrowed down to 40 artists, 20 from Mexico, 20 from the United States, from different musical backgrounds. About half are from DJ, producer, electronic music backgrounds, and about half are more composers, that write down notes for other people to play. Right. And we invited them to make a sample library, loops, bits of sounds, whatever came to them. Some improvised on their instruments, some made snare and bass drum and hi-hat samples, some recorded field recordings and things like that. It's really all over the place, but sounds from Mexico and Texas. And then we got together, once we had the sample library, the curators got together again and chose 13 artists to invite to make tracks for the album. Right. And what we asked of them was to make anything you want, but use these three things. One, something from the sample library.
Right.
2, some players from this ensemble in Mexico City, and 3, some players from an ensemble here in Austin.
Right.
So they created those things, and then we recorded in Mexico City and Austin, and mixed in Mexico City, and then we have this album. Once we did all that, we had to deconstruct and figure out, okay, how do we play this live? Because some of it's sampled and looped, and some of it's done by acoustic players. And we just put our minds to it. And that was really Felipe led that charge of like, okay, what does this look like live? And we worked together on that. And then we're going to start with an Austin concert, April 16th. And then we follow up with Mexico City and Marfa and beyond.
Yeah, that's really exciting.
I'm excited about it. It's been years in the making, but very happy with what came out of it. Right.
The challenge for the 13 artists. Do you ever watch the show called Chopped? It's a cooking show.
Oh, the cooking show, yeah.
Where you get like the box of things that everyone kind of has. It's kind of like that same thing. Like, hey, you got to use these things, but you can make your own song.
Here are your parameters.
Yeah.
Our box is deeper than the Chop box,
of course,
because it's 25 gigabytes of thousands of samples.
Yeah,
and so they really had a huge range of choices, but at the same time, just put some parameters around it, but then stylistically or anything else, no guidelines at all. They got to make what they wanted to make.
Right. And one of the coolest things, I think you were saying this last time we were talking, and I'm just remembering that you said it, but didn't you say that like you encourage also artists that would borrow from the library to also whatever you do to those samples, return them? Like
I think the sample library has have a living quality to it, where we can expand the library, and we hope people will make things with it, and then it becomes this sort of web of MXTX material.
Right. Where is it? Where can people just find it?
So we released the album first because we wanted the album artist to have sort of first take at using it.
Okay.
And then in the next month or two, we're going to release the sample library, and anybody can use it.
Okay.
And it's free, license-free samples that anybody can use.
Yeah. It's a fantastic record, and it really does explore all of the things that you described the artists were bringing to the table. There's like some traditional Latin stuff. There's some vocal stuff on there, and then there's some more orchestrated kind of like stuff, and even like some groove-driven.
Yeah. Thank you. I was hoping that the ensembles, there being, some common instruments, and then this sort of geographically defined thing in the sample library, that would make it cohesive enough. And, I grew up on mixtapes, so I like things to bounce around stylistically, and that doesn't mean it doesn't work together. I think they all, if something really heavy comes after something really delicate, it sounds that much heavier, and the other thing sounds that much more delicate and beautiful. And so I like heavy contrast.
Yeah. The show is going to be at the new Moody Amphitheater, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Outside in that beautiful area at Waterloo Park. That's April 16th. It's a Fusebox Festival. Is it going to be all 13 artists are coming to perform it, or?
Oh, good question. So part of the idea is that the people who compose the tracks, they don't have to perform at all. It's more in that more composer way where they made the track and then an ensemble plays it.
Okay.
So Orion will DJ, and certain components that can't be done by acoustic instruments or live instruments will be part of the DJ set, and he'll also manipulate it some and make it so it's an artistic choice, because like some of those vocals he'll have coming through his DJ station, and I'm curious to see what he does with those, whether he filters them or does something to make it both sound like the album but also uniquely him and uniquely different for the show.
Right. So as far as you seem to work under a couple of different names, like the Golden Hornet, the Golden Arm Trio, and Graham Wilkinson. Graham Reynolds. Oh, sorry, Jesus, sorry, dude.
No, it's all right.
There's Graham Reynolds.
You can edit if you want.
No, I've had Graham Wilkinson on the show maybe too many times. It's always on my mind.
I like it.
Do you know him?
I don't.
He's a good songwriter.
Yeah.
Under your own name, Graham Reynolds
Yeah.
is the scores and the sound, the
Yeah,
film
these
scores.
are poorly
Yeah.
defined things, but roughly, Golden Hornet is a nonprofit. So
Okay.
it's a 501c3 registered nonprofit. Started years and years ago with Peter Stupczynski, another composer, where we were just trying to get our composed music played. And eventually it evolved. Peter is not a big fan of meetings, and nonprofits have a lot of meetings. So
Yeah.
Peter still participates, but he's not part of the active running of it anymore. But the simple thing is we want to have composed music, meaning music that we wrote down and other people played, done.
Right.
And then as it grew as a nonprofit, less and less the material was our own, and more were other composers that we invited in to participate. So we have a youth program, we have an emerging composers program, and then we do these group commissions and other commissions like MXTX.
Like this, yeah.
And so I have one track, but then the other 12 artists are people that we commissioned. Golden Arm Trio, is the live performance vehicle where it's much more heavy on the improvisation, and I'm one of the performers. We came up with the name Golden Arm Trio, and then by the end of the first set that we played years and years ago at the old Emos, somebody had quit the band midway through the set. And so we were two people. Well, we had the name, and I just never got rid of it. So sometimes we're two people, sometimes we're 8 people. It really just kept the name, but it's a performance vehicle with more lead charts, lead sheets, and a lot of improv. So Golden Hornet, more notated. Golden Arm Trio, more improvised. And then under my name is sort of everything else, or whatever makes the most sense. So we have those 3 names that we use. I should get her to shut that.
Do you know Fishbone?
Yeah.
I just did one of these with Angelo Moore, but it was over Zoom,
awesome.
and he did that same thing, but he came back with a giant joint.
No, well, next time.
It was hilarious. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about your soundtrack work or your scoring work. We talked about that before, and
Sure.
my love for the movie Bernie. I've seen it a number of times,
awesome.
And I actually went through and listened to the Where'd You Go, Bernadette soundtrack, even though I never saw the movie.
Yeah.
I listened to it before when I was going through your stuff, but I listened to it again today when I was like doing stuff in my kitchen. That's gorgeous.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
And, I love both of those projects. Very different projects. But one thing that was nice about both of those is that they came off of material. One was an article Skip Hollandsworth had done, and then the other, Bernadette, was a novel. So as soon as the project comes up, I can go read those things and start incubating ideas and coming up with sketches and palette and things like that.
Sorry, can you walk us through that? Like you read it, you get a feeling like maybe a scene in the story gives you some melody feeling or something?
Yeah, sometimes composers are brought in the very end of the process.
Right.
After things are shot, and you get a cut, and then you just start composing to the cut. But it's really nice when you're brought in early, and then you can dive in, and then it's incubating. You, even when you're not actively, consciously composing,
right?
You know in the back of your head that this thing is there. And so I read the novel to sort of get my head inside the world of the piece, and then your brain starts working without you knowing it. And when you sit down at the piano, or you sit down at the whatever instrument I'm using to compose, I've already got some ideas back there that have welled up without realizing it.
Right. How you've done a lot of them. You've done a number of them for Linklater.
Yeah.
And you've done a number outside. How consistent is that as work? I mean, is it always coming in? Are you turning stuff down? Are you?
I mean, knock on wood, almost always I'm working on a film or a TV thing or something like that.
Do you have a manager for that? Is there a special guy out there doing the?
So I have a manager for just about everything else, but then film agents for that in particular.
Okay.
And so they're based in LA and more, directly in the film and TV world.
Yeah. Do you love doing that? Is that like?
Yeah, I mean, I love collaborating in all sorts of ways. The whole idea is that it pulls me out of the box I might normally put myself in without realizing. It pulls you. Every project pulls you in a new direction, and it also gives you an excuse to work outside of music, to read that novel and call it work, or
right.
to
research
the story of something or the history of something. And when I narrowed down from anything in the world I could do for a career to just music, that was narrow enough. And I like dipping my toes into other fields.
Yeah. So, where are you from?
Grew up in the Northeast, in Connecticut, outside of New Haven.
Okay.
And but then I played, piano and drums, and even though we were gigging in New York and stuff, it's hard to be in New York with drums. You have to rent a practice space, and I wanted to live with my instruments and not have to take a subway to go practice.
Yeah.
And so Austin I had been through, and vibrant music scene, and you could rent a house and instead of an apartment.
Yeah.
And so
what year was that you moved here?
93.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah, so it's been a good chunk of time.
Yeah.
I've been in Texas now more than I was in Connecticut.
So where did you went to school?
Yeah.
It's kind of hard,
yeah.
You can't just come from the streets and do this job. You got to be able to read music, write music out. You got to really you got to have some stuff going on.
I mean, I studied piano my whole life since from 5 until midway through college.
Can I ask you a question on that? Did you ask for the piano lessons, or were they imposed on you?
Asked. Well,
okay.
my mom was taking piano lessons, and I thought my mom was cool, and I said, I want to do that. And then my brother, who was a year younger, then followed suit. And what we didn't know at the time and didn't find out for years later is that she quit a year later, and we thought she just lost interest, but it was because once my brother joined, we couldn't afford to pay for her lessons and our lessons. So she chose to gift us the lessons and stop them for herself.
Wow.
Yeah, super generous.
That's really just. She's still alive?
She is, and she and my dad moved to Austin, so they come to shows, and we see them all the time.
Oh, that's fantastic, man. Yeah. What a great story. So where did you go to school?
So I went to school in Connecticut College. It's a little private school, and what I discovered, well, I didn't like the music department, and so I ended up quitting the music department, stopping piano lessons for the first time in my life, and just joining a million bands and learned how to play drums. Mm-hmm. And that's musically how I spent college. And what I thought at the time was I just gotten unlucky with the music program I had chosen. But then it turned out, looking back, I don't think there was a music program I would have been happy with. And even today, music programs are struggling to sort of keep up with the current state of music in the world.
I can imagine.
And so, I mean, there are many benefits to institutions moving slowly, but there are some drawbacks. And
right.
Anyway, so I studied Latin American history, actually. Was my focus, and that's where I learned how to think and how to write and put my thoughts together, and that was just as valuable as the very specific craft of music, because I'd been learning that stuff my whole life.
Yeah. Were you getting stuff from Marquez and Lorca and stuff like that?
There was a lot. Even though it was history, we spent a lot of time studying art, studying literature, poetry, all, and weaving that into the study of history.
Let's go back to some of those bands. What did you were playing drums and
Oh, it was anything. Basically, whoever would
got
take
for hire.
Me. Yeah, whether it was metal or classic rock or a jazz combo for Easter brunch, it didn't matter. I just wanted to learn.
That's interesting, man, because it seems like a lot of people, that's the feel of being a drummer in jazz, metal, or whatever. It's almost like a different guy for each thing. Were you able to adapt to the feel, and were you a voracious music listener? Did you know all the bands of the music you were based on you were playing?
My approach for a long time, and sort of started being very conscious about it starting in high school, was wide and shallow. So instead of narrow and deep, I decided, I figured out that I was not going to be the most advanced piano player, because there were people in my high school that could play piano technically better than I could. Oh, yeah. So I'm like, okay, if I'm not going to be the best piano player, I've got to figure out something else that will make me stronger as a musician. And so I decided to know a little bit about as many things as possible and just keep exploring and widening the scope, as opposed to, somebody like Coltrane or somebody that's hyper focused on one instrument, one constantly evolving but style, and really getting to the deepest point with that. So narrow and deep, and I was going the opposite way. So yeah, I would know a bunch about metal, but not as much as a full-on metal person might. I know a bunch about jazz, but not as much as a full-time jazz musician would. Yeah. But I knew enough to have the verbal conversation and enough to have a bit of the musical conversation as well.
That's pretty amazing. I mean,
well, that's the way it's fun for me, and I was just never going to claim to be the best at any of those one things, but hope that to be able to synthesize other influences into whatever idiom I was in at the time.
Yeah, like a musical slut.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. So you moved to Austin, and what did you do when you moved here? How did you get it together? Did you have a job or?
I cleaned houses for years and years.
That's a nice job where you can listen to music and kind of let your mind wander.
Exactly. That was the whole idea. Because, everybody was getting jobs or trying to get jobs at Waterloo or these music-related jobs. And what I wanted was a job that my brain would be free.
Yeah.
So essentially I could work on music all day long. And but my body would be a little bit active, but not active with something that demanded brain space.
Right.
And so that's cleaning houses was great for that. And essentially, the more work I got in music, the fewer houses I cleaned until eventually I sort of cross-faded between the two income streams.
So what kind of work were you getting in music? What was the first job you had here?
So
in Austin,
the first time we played was at Emos, the old Emos, and it was Monday night free show, $1 beer kind of show. But as soon as I started playing, people started asking me to score things. So I didn't pursue that. So people started asking, "Oh, I've got this film short or a puppet show or a theater thing, whatever it might be," and I just kept saying yes. And all those things grew into a slightly bigger job. So,
can I ask you quickly another question? When you were recording that, so what do you have, a 4-track cassette thing?
Yeah, exactly. And I did a lot of it with Buzz Moran, who we still work together. And there was a 4-track, and then an 8-track, and then a 16-track, and then eventually computers and interfaces and stuff like that. But at first, just cassette 4-track.
How were you doing it? You were playing piano and what else on those?
So when I moved to Austin, since I'd spent college learning how to play drums, but then my whole life I'd been playing piano, my idea was to come to Austin, figure out a band where I could play piano and drums, and so that's what I was doing for the longest time until Jeremy Bruck came along, and now he mostly plays the drums and the stuff we do, and I still do percussion stuff. I have a giant, huge 40-inch bass drum that I like to make noises with, and I'll do sort of cinematic or experimental percussion kind of work, but not so much drum kit work. Occasionally for a recording, if we're in the middle of something and need a beat laid down, I'll do that.
Who are the drummers that inspired you when you started playing drums? Who were the guys that you looked up to?
The first guy that comes to mind is Mitch Mitchell.
Oh yeah.
And I'd say Mitch Mitchell, and then there was a Chinese percussion album I had called Thundering Dragon, and I had a million influences, but I'd say those were probably the two biggest. His ability to synthesize his sort of jazz chops but also rock out with, one of the biggest rockers of all time. And then the Chinese percussion, in that the percussion paints a picture and tells stories rather than creates a groove. Okay. And so between those two very different approaches, I'd say those are a couple of the biggest influences on that.
Wow, that's amazing. All right, so then you're doing stuff around Austin. You're playing at Emo's. Was that Golden Arm Trio, or was
that
okay.
Exactly?
All right, so you're doing Golden Arm Trio at Emo's and stuff, and scoring stuff on your 4-track cassette. Yeah. How did you get? What was the first big your first thing where you got money up front to do something on a film or something? Because I know a lot of the student films and puppet shows don't really pay up front.
Yeah. Each time, he started with those tiny little jobs, and each job paid a little bit more.
Yeah.
And so there wasn't a hard line. We did a bunch of silent films with Tim League and Alamo.
Uh-huh.
And
I remember that.
Yeah. And that was great practice for scoring films. Yeah. And we knew how much we were going to get paid for those. So as opposed to playing at Emo's where you're getting a cut of the door,
right,
with the Alamo, we knew how much. So I sort of had a budget in mind. And the dance things and ballet things, those started being more clear I knew what the budget was ahead of time. The first new feature film I did was called The Journeyman, which is a Western. So that had a clear budget and, money up front and all that. And then the biggest leap was A Scanner Darkly.
Yeah.
You had big stars and Warner Brothers movie and all that. And so I was still cleaning houses when I did that, and my studio was still in my bedroom. But by the end of that film, which took a couple years, I stopped cleaning houses and I had a more proper setup for recording.
Yeah. That movie, I remember seeing it in the theater. It had Robert Downey Jr.
Yeah, Robert Downey Jr., Woody Harrelson, Keanu Reeves,
Alex Jones.
Yeah, Winona Ryder, Alex Jones, exactly.
Who's arguably as big a star as those guys at this point.
Yes, certainly the name is very well known.
Yeah. Who was that? Bob Savaston was the guy that he was kind of the guy that
with the
was the animation guy. Yeah. They did the Waking Life. Yeah. My ex-wife used to work with him. And I remember being around, seeing those first MTV, because the things he did very first were these MTV commercials.
Right.
And seeing those for the first time and just being like, wow, that is so... And I remember first watching A Waking Life and literally getting kind of dizzy while I was watching it, because you kind of have to acclimate to that movement.
Yeah. It's a wild, very distinct style of animating and filmmaking.
Yeah. A Scanner Darkly is a Philip K. Dick, so you read that before.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. As soon as Rick started talking about that movie, I'd read a bunch of Philip K. Dick already, but reread the book and started thinking about it.
Yeah. Do you ever have to get notes from producers and stuff and
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Almost everything I do, the director has final cut,
right?
And so that's the person who's at the center, where you're trying to complete their vision. But then there are a lot of other people involved that are part of the process in an important way. Producers, editors, often the editors are very directly working with your music and cutting to your music or replacing music that they had cut to, and so having dialogue with all those folks is helpful. And
it's such a big moving, it's a giant machine, when you get to that level to make a movie of something. Let me ask you this: have you noticed that since COVID and since the lockdown and since movies aren't getting the biggest releases anymore, or they're probably arguably bigger releases because everyone can watch them if they want to, but not in the theater, not
Right.
sort of that grand thing. Are budgets going down like crazy? Is it?
There's a lot more work. There's just what they call it content now.
Yeah.
And there's just so much content being made with all the streaming services and all that. And so there are fewer huge budget films, but there's more work in general, and the budgets aren't crazy tiny.
No. Okay.
So so far that effect has, I think, mostly been good for composers.
Yeah. But it's because it's gotten so weird that it's the same thing with music. Like there's so much more content.
Yeah.
And it seems like everybody has their own channel they can turn to in their, even podcast wise. If you just care about two musicians sitting around talking, you spend all day listening to any number of shows. Or if you only like classical music or something, you know what I mean? Like nowadays you can only, like if you only like comedy shows, that's
right.
Your whole life can be that. That's the thing that I feel like with all, I mean, do you feel like it's more difficult to get people's attention in even a world that was difficult to get people's attention in the first place?
Well, yes, in terms of there's more music, there are more people, there are more services, and from recordings there's a whole lot less income as well.
Right.
The
whole lot. Yeah.
Yeah.
A whole lot.
The only advantage, but it's a big one, is that these streaming services are global. And so say I'm making mostly instrumental music, and the vast majority of the world's popular music is vocal.
Yeah.
And so I'm already in a niche, and then I'm a niche within a niche. and so having global reach means you can find the people that are interested in that. And so in some ways it's easier to find an audience because anyone who's interested in your music anywhere in the world can access it, and that's an exciting new thing.
Right. Have you ever used Patreon or anything like that, or?
No, we've never done that. We've done Kickstarters before, and Golden Hornet raises money as a nonprofit, so there's that. But I've never personally done a Patreon thing.
Okay. You said that part of Golden Hornet's thing is education as well?
We have a youth program where they, a bunch of young artists co-produce with us and then compose all the music for a concert every year. And they start with the first meeting in August, and then they do the concert in March. And the whole time they're learning about the production side, but also creating their own pieces.
That's amazing.
It's super fun. It's love watching them grow as artists and hearing what they come up with, and it's always much more mature artistically than people expect.
Right. How do they find you? Is there like an audition time, or is there a...
Auditions are something I don't like. I find the sort of power dynamics and hierarchy of those rooms are so ugly that we do take applications, and we ask them to sort of describe what they imagine making, and then if we have too many young artists that for us to be able to handle, we'll work with some of the student leaders from the prior years to help narrow down, like making sure that the cohort of artists is diverse, that they're we've got a wide age range as well, that we're serving the people who could most use the program.
Right. And do you teach like at UT or ACC or anything?
No, I do a little bit of teaching with Austin Chamber Music Center. Peter Stopczynski and I do that, and then we have the youth program. Those are pretty much the ways. And sometimes I'll have interns from UT and things like that, but no, nothing at a school.
No. Okay.
Yeah.
So as far as like the MXTX, you've got the shows Mexico City and in Marfa coming up. After that, what are you working on today? Like, what's your...
Today,
got your team in here?
Yeah, we're working on a film, which I can't talk about too much, but we're pretty excited about. And so, been making a lot of music for that. I've also been developing a solo set and learning a lot about guitar pedals and things like that, and sort of more electronic ways to make music. But I'm starting with a kalimba and putting that through the pedal, so that's a very acoustic source. And I've always got a million projects. We've got a couple of dance things coming up with Forklift Dance Works, and then with Aerial Dance Theater. So
Awesome.
Putting the music together for those. And then there are a couple films I scored in the past year or so that are coming out soon, and I'll they'll be at festivals, and then they'll be streaming.
Okay. That's exciting. You got a film that you can't talk about.
Yeah.
That's always a good thing.
It's always fun.
Tell me a little bit about this solo performance. Where are you going to do it?
So I did BuzzFest at the beginning of March, and now I've been, sort of, that was one of my pandemic projects, like come up with something that I'm doing everything. And most of that was in the computer, and now I'm doing outside of the computer stuff, outside of the DOS or Ableton or anything like that.
Using looping pedals and stuff?
Yeah, exactly. And I've got a little sampler called a 1010 Music Black Box, and it's amazing. The workflow is great, and just all sorts of fun gadgets. A synthesizer from the Czech Republic called a Vector, and just learning about them, having fun, and figuring out where I'm going next with that.
Is it like, are you like it's a solo show? So in the show, are you improvising? Or?
Yeah, I came up with, like, for this last show, a combination of sort of a framework and of what I knew was going to happen, but then improvised around that. And I had my big huge bass drum that I like to play with, and some metal cans, and some acoustic stuff to play with, and then the electronic gadgets as well. So sort of electro-acoustic hybrid.
That's awesome.
It's super fun. I've been having a great time.
Do you sing at all? No. Yes.
No, not really. I mean, for rehearsal purposes or
Right.
composition purposes, but performance-wise, no.
No. So see you sitting on a stool.
Yeah.
Singing your songs and
I mean,
stuff.
it's fun to sing songs, but
Yeah.
it's not something that piano and percussion I'll do publicly, and then other instruments, I don't really perform on guitar, but for recording purposes, it makes sense for me to play it, then I will.
Yeah. You have a whole bunch of guitars.
Yeah, I like guitar a lot.
Yeah. What did you, out of the pedals that you got, like, are there any that you're like, oh my God, you're never going to believe what this pedal does?
This Electro Harmonix tremolo pedal called Super Pulsar, it's just like, it takes tremolo to
Really?
extremes that I never would have guessed, but at the same time it's intuitive and super fun. So then this Eventide pedal, delay pedal, I think have been the most fun that I've really dug in. But yeah, the tremolo can almost sound like a ring modulator once it gets super fast, because you turn the rate up and up and up until it gets to a point where it's turning it on and off at a fast rate that does strange things. It can make rhythmic patterns with it. It can be volume sensitive, so you play loudly and the tremolo is fast, and then as the sound decays, the tremolo slows down. So it makes for a very expressive tremolo.
Wow.
So it's such a great sound already. Like on the kalimba, it just gives it this richness. You put vibrato on a human voice, and it sounds expressive, and so it does a similar thing to whatever sound source is coming through the tremolo. But then that thing where it's volume sensitive really takes the expression portion of it way up. And so, yeah, you get experimental sounds out of it, but also more human sounding sounds by using those parameters.
Yeah. Are you listening to anything these days? Like, what do you listen to?
I try to listen to as many different directions and
Same.
many different things as I can.
Wide and shallow.
Yeah,
Yeah.
wide and shallow.
Yeah.
So learning about new things. I just met this artist Tarek, and I'm gonna get his last name wrong. So I'm not gonna say it because it starts with A. It's got and then a bunch of vowels.
Okay.
But I can send you a link for that. Like if you do comments, or you can put it. But
Yeah.
He's did one album called Mort au Vent, so MORTAUXVENTS, and experimental electronic sounds, which usually get really old. That sort of when they're that abstract, but somehow I think through patterns and they almost get a groove to them. He makes some very accessible but very experimental sounds, and so he's got a new installation up at the Contemporary downtown.
Oh, really?
And
awesome.
He did this one album, and then he switched to albums were not his format. Installations are now his format, and so you can go hear his stuff at the Contemporary, right on the Jones Center, 7th Street and Congress.
Yeah.
So I was excited to meet him yesterday, and I'd been listening to his album for a couple of years now, so that he's now got this thing up in Austin. It's super cool. And Mika Levy is a soundtrack artist, but also singer and songwriter, but both very experimental and raw, but very accessible. And she's done some really wide range of work. You would never guess that she would have made the soundtracks she made when you listen to her songs. So she's a British artist, I think based in London, but I'm not sure. So there's a couple people I've been listening to lately.
Wow. What about as far as like film scoring composers? Who are some of your guys that you look up to?
So Mika Levy is one.
Okay.
And then I'm gonna forget her name. The woman who from, I believe she's Icelandic, and she did the Joker score, which is amazing, and the Chernobyl score, and
Both of those were amazing.
yeah, she I think is a cellist originally, and her independent albums really, you can hear how she ended up at the Joker and Chernobyl soundtracks.
Right.
And so she's, I think, the most compelling artist working in film right now.
Wow.
Where like totally personal sounding,
Yeah.
but adapted to those two very different, both very dark, but still very
Right.
different pieces, Chernobyl and Joker. So I'd say she's the one I spend the most time listening to right now.
Yeah. I've been really, I guess I went through a Johnny Greenwood thing
Oh yeah,
a little while back. I guess when the Power of the Dog
yeah,
came out, because I noticed that there's this brutality to the sounds that he records, like even just like the cello, like the bow on the strings is just like, you know what I mean? Like there's just always like this, like, it's weird. It's like this naked kind of like brutality, like of ugly beauty. Like,
well, I think there are a bunch of film composers now who develop their chops playing bands, like Johnny Greenwood, and that's a very different place than growing up and doing or developing your art with orchestras or in more traditional composer environments.
Right.
And you become very aware of microphones and microphone placement and the different
that's true.
things
Yeah.
that the assumed knowledge in a band member is very different from the assumed knowledge in an orchestral writer.
Right.
And so, what's the guy that recorded Steve Albini?
Yeah.
So you think of Steve Albini and like microphone choices and like lack of reverb choices and room sound and all that. And I think Johnny Greenwood is steeped in that approach. Or Rick Rubin doing Johnny Cash, and like
You're right.
Oh, like all of a sudden it sounds like Johnny Cash again.
Yeah.
More Johnny Cash than you'd heard him since the '60s or something.
Right.
And so I think Johnny Greenwood is coming not only with his rock background and his experimental background and his electric guitar rather than piano background. But also he went to conservatory, and so he's got those traditional chops, and mixing it all together with hyper awareness of instrumental color and how the recording process impacts that. So if he wants a raw cello sound, he knows how to talk about that.
Right.
And he knows how to do that. I also think like he has such a strong artistic presence and voice that he's trusted to do things that a filmmaker, especially producers, might be more conservative on if it wasn't a big rock star making that music. Right. So he does stranger music that is mixed more loudly than you might expect in a mainstream film because he's Johnny Greenwood. And I think that opens up, in a way, the ability for other composers to do more boundary-pushing work.
Yeah. That's a good thing. It's funny when you said that about knowing mic placement, then you're like, oh yeah, because those cellos, nobody mics a cello that close or in that place.
I mean,
nobody does that.
Symphony halls and chamber music rooms are designed to take those edges away. Mm-hmm. They're reverberant, warm rooms, and you sit at a distance to let the sound mellow out a little bit.
Yeah.
And, but if you close mic something, you get the person's breath, you get the bow noise, you get the creaks, you get all sorts of sounds that a person in an audience would never hear, but the microphone picks up and magnifies.
Yeah. Speaking of beautiful like rooms and stuff, like your studio room is beautiful, and I'll put the link to the EPK of the MXTX.
Great.
So that people can kind of get an idea of it. I was glad when you invited me over because it looked so cool. Who designed it?
So I sort of dreamt up the room I wanted, but I don't have any architecture or anything. But I sort of I wanted it to feel a bit like a library or a bit like a billiard parlor or something like that, and someplace where you're surrounded by wood and books and something comfortable. But with high ceilings and all that. And I prefer one big room to a studio with a bunch of separate rooms and tracking rooms and all that. I like the energy of everybody being in the same place.
Me too.
And so then Cassandra did the basic design, and then Colby Turner, the contractor, did the took that and then got creative with it. So the ceiling and certain special features are like that. So Cassandra Ramirez and Colby Turner.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, they did an amazing job. I'm trying to think of what else we should cover on this stuff as far as like records. Do you record other people in here at all? Do you?
Rarely.
Okay.
Every once in a while. But I have so many projects going all the time that it's usually the studio is pretty occupied just making my stuff.
And you don't do like string arrangements, like Stephen Barber?
Yeah. Yeah. Every once in a while, we did some string arrangements for DJ Spooky a while back.
Oh, cool.
So here and there, but typically not.
Yeah.
That's fun to do though.
Yeah, it seems like a really, like you just get to. It's like getting to come up with great icing on a cake.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, or like make little Scooby-Doo figures to put on. Do you have kids?
No. I grew up in a daycare. My mom had a daycare in the house, so I love kids, but I had a crib in my room literally my whole life.
Yeah,
and so I changed enough diapers.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, I get it. Well, man, this has been great talking to you. People can find the MXTX, a Cross-Border Exchange album, wherever it is you stream and download music. Also, the show, the Fusebox Festival, Monday, right? Oh, Saturday. At the Moody, sorry. At
the Moody Theater, Waterloo Park, Saturday, April 16th.
Yeah, not Monday. Maybe my reading glasses will have my own writing in here. Yeah, exactly. And people can go and find tickets at goldenhornet.org/MXTX.
Yep.
And people can find you at grahamreynolds.com. And 6 Degrees Records, is that your label? Or is that another?
No, they
international.
That's a label that does a lot of international stuff, and they've been great partners on this.
Awesome, man.
Yeah.
Well, I'm really looking forward to everything else that you do. Thank you for having me over.
Oh, thanks for coming.
And it's great talking to you, man.
You as well.
All right,
Thank you.
That's Graham Reynolds. You can find MXTX at Cross Border Exchange wherever it is you stream and download your music. You can get tickets to the show. You can find out about the sample library, everything by going to goldenhornet.org/MXTX. And the show takes place April 16th at Moody Theater at Waterloo Park. Okay? Go to goldenhornet.org/MXTX. All right? And don't forget, when you're out there checking out Graham Reynolds and goldenhornet.org/MXTX. Don't forget that you can subscribe to this podcast wherever you get podcasts, new podcasts all the time. All the time, every Tuesday and every Friday for sure. Sometimes 3 a week, sometimes more. All right? Have a great week, whatever it is you're doing. Let's listen to this song, which is from MXTX, Across Border Exchange, the album. This is Mundo en Extinción, with Ruben Albarán and Ramon Amezucua Postich. All right? Get out there and check out this record. Have a great, 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 great week. Love you guys. Let's get down.